We next have the panel on education reforms, and I call upon Dr. Arjuna Parakrama to call on his panel members. And Dr. Arjuna Parakrama, I think, needs again no introduction. It's very interesting what he has put in a very brief profile. He says he tries to teach at Peradeniya, tried to learn from subalternized communities in border village areas. Academics often consider him to be too activist, while activists feel that he is too theoretical. Not fitting in is what he does best. So on that note, we call upon you to take your seats at the panel.
Good morning all. I speak for all of us here when I say it's a pleasure and privilege to be with you today. This and ours is an independent panel on education for governance. Today we have a very limited time and much thinking and sharing to do, so let's get on with it immediately. We have 3 panelists. In order to maintain a clear focus and to avoid overlap, as well as to ensure as far as possible to cover this vast terrain, our discussions will primarily focus on a core area, but maintain a conversation between and among each other across these areas via common themes and concerns. Our views are not identical, nor should they be, but we share a common ideal that quality education for all in the national interest that entrenches fundamental rights and basic values. Professor Harendra De Silva, our first speaker, will base himself in higher education while tracing its causes and consequences across the entire educational landscape. Our next speaker, Dr. Tara Dimel, will deepen and widen some of our core concerns from the perspective of the broader secondary school education sector, while also discussing their ramifications both above and below in the tertiary and primary education sectors. Our final speaker, Ms. Nilu Anandappa, will address concerns on the ground in primary and junior secondary teaching and learning today, using her diverse experience and expertise in addressing the consequences of policies and programs on children in Sri Lanka. To reiterate, our collective aim and focus is to analyze core strengths, challenges, bottlenecks, opportunities in order to argue for ways forward in terms of the principles that we espouse and believe to be fundamental to address these problems and capitalize on these gains. Hence, our panel will end in the second round with each participant spending 2 minutes to identify what he or she believes to be the most difficult future goal or objective to achieve in the education sector, and similarly what they believe to be the most difficult. So the most difficult and the easiest, for which they will succinctly state why they think so. Over to you, Professor Arindra.
Due to time constraints, I would have to read out from the script and would give a bird's eye view of the problem, and my recommendations would be throughout the presentation rather than at the end. Similar to primary education, higher education too is heavily subsidized. Our subsidies do have benefits to the underprivileged. When people invest as a population, it is considered as an investment on human capital, and the country and the people need to benefit in return. However, Sri Lanka invests and groom professionals, especially those with a STEM education, i.e. science, technology, engineering and mathematics, to migrate to developed countries that will benefit. Politicians, however, have used subsidies in their populist strategies to boost their popularity. In our country, the brain drain may be premeditated when many children are groomed to migrate, especially those attending private schools, foreign exams, of course, and denied entry to the state higher educational system, and forced to do higher education in another country. Standardization, with many of its benefits, also negatively discriminate the privileged classes who are forced to leave the country for the lack of higher educational opportunities. Higher education policies have faltered by focusing mainly on politically driven student intakes to universities and unemployment. Basically, we operate in a politicized, socialist-driven, state-owned monopoly in a closed educational model, thereby losing competitiveness for progress. Even the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine is a state monopoly, not allowing competition. The World Bank sector report in 2017 states that Sri Lanka produced the highest proportion of graduates in humanities and social sciences, ranking first, while producing one of the lowest proportion of graduates in STEM subjects, ranking 92nd in the world. STEM subjects are directly responsible for the infrastructure and economic development. However, there is no doubt that we need subjects in humanities such as English and sociology. We need to incorporate aspects of humanities in the curricula in order to humanize the mechanical and materialistic aspects of STEM education by boosting the use of language, communication skills, social and psychological aspects relevant to STEM subjects. We need to rethink on our allocation of subject staff and university seats, especially related to STEM subjects, according to the needs of development. These changes should begin from the level of secondary schooling. Approach of learning even STEM subjects to continue on the lines of memorizing and reproducing tuition teachers and tutorials which are memorized even by the students. In order to become a knowledge hub and a global economy, incorporating aspects of critical thinking, numeracy and IT skills in curricula, including in subjects of humanities, is important and should start from the primary school. Measurement of educational level of a population by just literacy alone would not reflect on development. Regional countries and Australia are targeting our students to earn dollars while we are siphoning out billions in foreign exchange. At present, there is a team from Pakistan in Sri Lanka touting for students in troubled waters. Export income from international education activity in Australia for 2019 was 37.5 billion Australian dollars, making it their third largest export. Isn't it possible to prevent the massive foreign exchange loss from Sri Lanka by establishing or converting some of these higher learning universities to at least as a part-living establishments, especially for foreign students? Let me emphasize, private universities should be under the purview of academic institutions, continuously and monitored for proper standards, which is important to understand. Undoubtedly, it will raise a hornet's nest with professionals and trade unions with populist and extremist policies. Would governments succumb to political pressure, as history has proven previously? Humans, like all animals, struggle to survive physically and economically. Either we have to fight, as in armed revolutions, or a peaceful regalia, or take flight by immigrating. Governments have to develop strategies to give incentives for people to survive instead of trying to survive themselves politically in parliament. Why have we failed to implement some new positive educational reforms? We need to ensure allocation of financial resources using pressure, which is a reflection of a government's commitment towards implementation. Legislation should include not only policy, but specific and clear operational guidelines with roles and responsibilities at different levels of stakeholders. If not, gazettes and regulations have to be introduced by the minister to put policy into practice. And have we done that? We need to do research on that. We need to research into the opposition by key stakeholders due to threat to their territory, like tuition. In fact, it should happen before the forms are introduced. Inadequate human resources is the main barrier in implementation, not necessarily due to numbers, but due to lack of expertise in professional fields. Think of international and local expertise in training of trainers or TOT to widen the expert knowledge and skills base in Sri Lanka. Finally, a system should be in place to monitor implementation and make stakeholders accountable for non-implementation and have a reward system for a positive action. I think it was mentioned before about a minister who will monitor action taken, a part of good governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Harendra. Dr. Tara Dimel. And may I sort of invite the audience, please formulate questions in whatever language you are convenient with, and there will be an opportunity to ask the questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. During my 7 minutes allocated in the first round, I just intend highlighting 5 to 6 key issues connected to education. But definitely in the second round, I would be mentioning how those can be implemented, and I would be really willing to answer any questions that you would have on the points that I'm mentioning. So the first point, in my experience of having worked in the sector very intimately and directly for nearly 11 or 12 years, over the years what we have seen is that we have been continuously, consistently depriving the right to a high quality education for the children attending the government schools. That's 10,155 schools. So we have deprived them of the right to a high quality. What do I mean by high quality? High quality means the quality that is available in the affluent international schools and the more elite national schools in the country. And I'm talking of facilities like learning IT, digital learning, STEM education, AI, and similar. That is what I mean by quality, and not just basic infrastructure that schools can offer. The second thing that we have been doing consistently is depriving the choice. We have actually disallowed choice. What do I mean by disallowed choice? Today, if students want from primary to learn in the English medium, they cannot, because we means the government decides who should learn in the English medium and who should not. I think the choice has to be with the parent. If the parent feels that child needs to be given education in the English medium, it's up to the government to actually provide that. Look at science, technology subjects, and maths. We have, out of the 10,100 schools, we have about 3,000 schools offering advanced level classes. But out of that 3,000, just about 900 have the facilities to offer science, maths, and technology in English. So if an A-level student wants to study science and maths, they have to somehow squeeze into those 800 schools, which is almost an impossibility. And then we have the issue of whether he or she can learn those in English. So we have deprived students of their choice. I just highlighted 2 areas only. If we just look at the governance of schools and universities, Harendra touched on the universities. Schools are in no position to govern themselves. There's no autonomy. Principals are not empowered to take decisions for their schools. Every single directive has to come from the center, from the ministry. So that deprives innovation, teachers and principals are often extremely talented, but most of the time they cannot implement what they want, whether it's in terms of curriculum or pedagogy. We have this crucial issue, which often people don't talk about, and that is this number. We have nearly 350,000 students applying for grade 1 every year. Once they come into grade 1, they go up to the O-level. At O-level, nearly 100,000 or more drop out after the exam. They fall off the radar. Some go into vocational training institutions, some don't. We have no idea what happens to them. During the COVID period, that number would have increased, but we have no record of how many students dropped out of the education system. Then we come to the A-level. We have nearly 250,000 therefore sitting the advanced level exam, of which just about 15% or 18% would be able to enter university. And why that happens and what should we do to prevent that number falling further is something of a huge concern. The pandemic hit us. It took us on a big ride, downfall really, of learning losses for 2 years, like every other country, but we never estimated our learning losses. So we were flying blind. We don't know how much of learning our students have lost in that 2-year period. I always say Sri Lanka enjoyed the double whammy because we came out of the COVID and entered the economic, fuel and food crisis, which is going on even as I speak. We have no accountability in the education system. If a student is deprived of what he or should get in terms of science or maths or digital learning or any one of those specialities, there's no way of redress. There is no way that a parent can demand that a student is entitled to these facilities. There is no way that a parent can actually, unless the parent takes legal action, but then we know what a tall order that is. Curriculum and pedagogy, I'm going to just very briefly speak on that. We have an ancient curriculum, even more ancient pedagogical implementation tools before us, which is definitely not suited for 2030 and beyond. A study published recently by the University of Oxford says that by 2030, 30% of the jobs that are going to be available are not available today. So we need to use the newer technologies to know what those jobs are going to be, but our students are not exposed to that. 23 years ago, when I was working in the ministry and we designed a primary curriculum, today the same primary curriculum exists. We are 23 or 24 years late. How fast the world is traveling at a tremendous speed. Education is developing, east to west, African continent to Southeast Asian nations and beyond. But we have the same curriculum, same pedagogical skills. We are not prepared in any way for the alpha generation, the generation that was born after 2010 and will be born up to 2024. Those are the kids in the primary school and in the junior secondary school. We are not prepared for Generation Alpha. We don't even talk about it. The Aragalaya taught us so many lessons. The Aragalaya was conceptualized and led from day one by Gen Z, as we all know. The Generation Z created the Aragalaya because education system didn't meet their needs. The employment opportunities were not there for what they really wanted. So these are the lessons we have to learn. The disparities are massive. That's why we have a division, large division in education, and we have to prepare for the future if any kind of exit from this hole is ever going to be possible. So I'll pause at this moment, but as I said earlier, I'll be very happy to answer any questions during the Q&A. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. Now, Ms. Anandappa, for your presentation, please.
Good morning, everyone. This is regarding, like my seniors have touched up all the common, like all the strategies, all the stuff what Sri Lanka is facing right now. So as a teacher, I would like to share this main thing. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Richard for bringing up these attitudes, the word which is lacking right now in Sri Lanka, especially among kids. Within these few months, we have heard lot of tragedies between kids, all school kids. So I'm actually bringing up this in a 360 degrees because as a mom and as a teacher. Nowadays, normally when a parent, they admit a kid, they start going to all of these schools and checking what are the curriculum, what my child is learning when he is or she is in preschool, what will she or he learn in KG1, KG2 or year 1 or year 2, whatever it is. It's curriculum. No one asks what my child will learn about attitudes. How will the child be brought up with all these good qualities? Because mainly they focus only according to the curriculum. Due to this pandemic, maybe they are all stressed out with all this. Attitudes basically should be brought up for a kid from the beginning, right at the first level in the schools. I just like to ask a question. Have you ever thought any of the schools they are teaching attitudes at the preschool classes? I'll tell you this, better I'll tell it in Sinhala. Once I got a call. Teacher, මට හොඳ ඉස්කෝලයක් කියන්න. හැබැයි මට දැනගන්න ඕනේ මගේ දරුවා මේ අවුරුදු 3 වෙද්දී ඉවර කරන කොටස මොකක්ද? ඒ කියන්නේ ඉලක්කම අංක 100 වෙනකන් ලියනවද? පාඨ උගන්වනවද? ඒ වගේ දේවල්. So what I told was, as an example, Japan. A country where they teach their kids, first of all at the preschool, to dry, to wash their own plate, to clean their small sinks, and help their dad to wash the car. If we do those things in Sri Lanka, what will happen? What will happen? So those attitudes should come first. Here over Sri Lanka, nowadays, the education has been a big stress. So much of books, so much of plans, but it's like running behind a huge book. You have to think there are main concerns about education, that's true, but to educate, we should have kids, proper citizens. Just think about the past scenarios where we have heard in news that these type of, they are murders. So my first point is, all the schools should have morals and ethics. I know we do have morals and ethics lesson, religion lesson, but personally I know there are some teachers who do not use that period for that morals and ethics. They are running behind syllabuses, which is a must, that's true. But attitudes basically is the first part a child should build up. The child should know failure is not something negative, but to learn from the failure and go further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anandappa. Now we go to the final component, which is where our panelists will tell us very briefly what they think is the low-hanging fruit in terms of the goals they require and what is the hardest and why. Over to you, Professor Harinder.
Sorry, I couldn't follow it.
The easiest of those goals that you have to achieve and the hardest that you have to achieve and why you think they are easy and hard. Quickly.
In terms of higher education, I think we can stop some of the outflow of foreign exchange going out, partly because of all the reasons I mentioned, by establishing institutions that would provide STEM subjects, STEM education in Sri Lanka, provided you tackle the opposition that's going to come with it. But that is quick, and that will, because we have the resources, we have teachers, we have enough people to start on those, and we have buildings for that. That would be one of the easiest things to do, because it will get money into the country as well as prevent at least some of the money going out. I think some of the more difficult, and the other thing is we probably don't have to reinvent the wheel. We already have certain policies which are limited to documents, which has not come into practice. I will try to, okay, that's fine. I think there are lots of policies on paper, in documents, in books, and so on, which has never been implemented. So implementing some of those things, if it is not in the legislation or in the cabinet decisions that was taken, right, it has to be made effective by the minister putting out regulations and then sort of gazetting it, and regulations being distinct in terms of making it effective. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have. We have a lot of policy which is on paper but never implemented because of lack of regulations and so on. So that's also easy to do. But the difficult ones would be the attitudinal change, and then also getting the expert knowledge into the teaching profession, and sort of introducing more STEM teachers, because we may not have the expertise. So we need, of course, foreign as well as local experts to come in, which will take time, but that change has to take place at some point.
Dr. Dimel?
In terms of low-hanging fruits, the easiest that I can say very quickly is to effectively decentralize education, devolve responsibility, as per the 13th Amendment in the Constitution, where actually the provincial councils, the zonal education directors are all empowered to take decisions on managing education at school level. It's only the NEC has to design policy and the guidelines, but the actual management is delegated officially, but it does not happen. Quick anecdote in that situation. We had the COVID pandemic, as you all know. It hit not just Sri Lanka, all the countries. Schools closed all over, but that school closure decision was essentially based on a presumption. The presumption being that schools were a hub which would transmit the infection from teacher to student and student to teacher. But within 4 or 5 months, across the world, excellent research publications came to show that, in fact, the kind of importance given to school closures was inappropriate, and the loss of education through school closures was far greater. So therefore, by November 2020, most schools in the other parts of the world reopened, but we didn't. So one of the things we could have done was to reopen schools, because the peripheral schools are small, they are well ventilated, the principals are able to take decisions, they are in like very big schoolyards. But when decisions were taken by those principals and the zonal directors to keep the schools open, they get a counter directive from the ministry saying, close the schools, because the Ministry of Health says this or somebody else says this. So they get overruled. Just to show that we could have reduced the learning losses Sri Lanka has had, undocumented of course, by more than half if actual devolution and autonomy was given. To that extent, immediate thing, again a low-hanging fruit, would be to quickly amend the Education Ordinance 1939. We are still going on the Education Ordinance, renamed Act 1939, and this is 2023. What's the hardest? Hardest, in my opinion, entirely through experience, is the political interference. Political interference on education comes across the board, whether it's on school admissions, whether it's on teacher transfers, whether it's even to allocate certain schools, assigning certain schools to offer advanced level science classes. So to that degree, political interference, it's like endemic. And that, to me, is the biggest disaster. If that is taken out of the system, I think many of the things we all spoke about can come into effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anandappa?
So, to develop attitudes among kids, psychosocial counseling should be a part of the curriculum, same as maths, English, science, and computer. A teacher should be well trained for many things to their students, as a mentor, counselor, and a friend. Schools should nurture a democratic environment. The children should feel they can trust their teachers. They should have the confidence to approach them when they want. As a teacher, I would say attitudes, ethics, values, and morals should be taught from the primary grades, right from the kindergarten. Special programs should be introduced in every school to make the children aware. It should be a compulsory subject, same as the core subjects. All the teachers should teach their kids to walk on the same shoe, figure out the situation before giving aggressive judgments and ending up in suicides and murdering stuff. Dear all, it says, life is something between B and D, birth to death. And C comes in between as choices. Our choices should only be based on not your kid or my kid. It's just simple as our kid. Just Sri Lankan whole nation kids. Thank you.
Thank you to the panel. I am reserving the summary because we may have question and answer in the comment, and we will give you the summary at the end. So thank you very much for your patient listening, and we hope we have been able to contribute something to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Though short, I know time was short, but very, very useful pointers towards the right direction. And I think there were many things that we can push for. So thank you once again, Dr. Parakrama and the panel. Before the next panel, I think it's very important to acknowledge the diversity of our audience. So we have from our esteemed speakers who are academics, professionals, civil society leaders, we also have people from the outstations, particularly the People's Participatory Foundations of many provinces. So we are represented here by the rural community and the estate communities. We also have the senior members, all the older children of 3 children's clubs in Colombo, and they will be our leaders of tomorrow. We also have many youth representatives here, and we also have the most important people who actually drive our society forward, and these are the important people who stay at home, who run the family and look after and nurture the next generation. So I think you should give a big round of applause to yourselves for being here. Let us hear you. We have heard the applause that is very, very weak. Come on, you can do better than that.